Now, our third type of risk is a little bit more sophisticated, but that's because you have more control over it. You, either as an individual or as someone in charge of deciding these sorts of things for a small organization, have a great deal of control over who has access to your information. This includes both intentional access through file sharing cloud services like Google Docs or Dropbox. It also includes unintentional access you might provide to someone to your data and your activity through using an unsecured Wi-Fi access point. We're about to discuss how to share files and information thoughtfully and with intentionality, and also how to use a VPN to prevent your data and your information from being accessed and used by unknown parties. Now, the first element of this is about secure file sharing, storage, and access control. Now, a lot of small organizations, a lot of political campaigns, a lot of nonprofits, a lot of small businesses use cloud-based collaborative file sharing, collaborative working platforms like Google Drive, Google Docs, Office 365, Dropbox, or some other sort of similar cloud-based service in order to share and collaborate on documents and other files. This is familiar, everyone knows how this works. Now, we talked earlier about the risk associated with that, where because you move fast, you might give access to someone that doesn't necessarily need to have access to something. Or someone who no longer needs access to a drive or a set of files might still, even though they've already left the organization. If someone with a compromised email address, meaning the credentials for that email address have been compromised, is shared into and has access to a shared directory, a shared set of files, your Google Drive, your Team Drive, your Dropbox, whatever it is, whatever you might be using. If that email address is compromised, then whoever has compromised that email address now has access to all the files they've been shared into. And that's a problem. This is why you should be thoughtful and intentional about who has access to which files and which directories and why. And this is why you should regularly, within your organization, conduct an audit of who has access to which drives and files and why. This will allow you to maintain proper, thoughtful, intentional access to files and directories, and will allow you to keep people out of places that they don't belong. This also provides the opportunity to intentionally and thoughtfully manage how people get offboarded out of the organization in terms of access and access control. If someone is no longer with the organization anymore and their digital accounts, their access is not offboarded, then if no one's paying attention to that email address or that account, it can become compromised. You may not know it, and then suddenly everything that person had access to has now been compromised as well. So being thoughtful about how access is granted to files and directories is important, and regularly auditing who has access to which files and directories is also a vital part of mitigating this risk. Now, political organizations deal with volunteers. Sometimes there's a board. You're dealing with consultants. You're dealing with people that are outside of the organization. Your normal operating procedure should be to only provide access to shared files and directories to people that are using an email address or an identity that you control. So for instance, if I'm running for Congress and it's the Berthume for Congress campaign, anyone that's going to have access to our shared files, any kind of confidential or sensitive information, any kind of access to shared team drives, shared files, whatever it is, I want everyone to have a Berthume for Congress email address if they're going to be able to access things. This is because if someone has an AOL address or a Yahoo address or any other big major sort of free email address, I don't know anything about how they manage the security for that email address. Maybe they haven't updated their password in 12 years. Maybe they use the same password for everything. I don't want to give them access to all of our information on the team drive. I don't want to share them into everything, because if that email address is compromised, then now who knows has access to all of our stuff. Sometimes you can't avoid that. Sometimes you have to give people outside the organization access to your cloud platform or your collaborative workspace. In that instance, it is always in your best interest to create purpose-built, segregated, siloed drives that are only for the purpose of whatever that person needs. So for instance, if I am working with someone else and it's another campaign or let's say it's Jimmy for Congress in this case, and Jimmy for Congress's people want access to some of our files, or we're gonna work on some things together. In our team drive, I'm gonna make a folder that is specifically for Jimmy for Congress. In Dropbox, I'm gonna make its own folder. Whatever platform you're using, you can usually at the folder level, and often even at the file level, say this is just for this. In this case, you're gonna have to have multiple files in there and be able to collaborate. So we're gonna make a folder that's specifically just for Jimmy for Congress, and we're gonna work together in there, and that way, that access does not bleed over into my larger file ecosystem. This is what it means to be intentional and thoughtful about access control and about really actively, vigilantly managing in an engaged, proactive way who has access to what, while you're also being thoughtful and considerative of why. Now, the other dimension of access control deals with VPNs, or virtual private networks. Everyone that lives in our society, basically, from time to time finds themselves using an unsecured Wi-Fi hotspot or access point. This happens in coffee shops, airports, hotels, libraries, like any place you can imagine where Wi-Fi is available for common public use. People are using that. And if you're watching this video and you're engaged in this kind of thinking about digital risk, you probably have too. Now, whoever is running a public Wi-Fi network, or any Wi-Fi network at all, but specifically in this case, a public one that's unsecured, they can see what's being passed over that network, and in some cases even intercepted. So your activity is monitorable. You have no privacy, essentially, on an open and unsecured Wi-Fi network. Also, and this is a more sinister version of this, a spoofed public Wi-Fi network, meaning like a fake Starbucks or McDonald's Wi-Fi network, or something in an airport like a Wi-Fi node, those can be used to harvest email address and password combinations, and also to just intercept or get into unsecured devices. Now, they can do that by requiring a login, and it can look and feel, this is sort of almost like a Wi-Fi access point version of phishing, look and feel just like when you would log in at a hotel or a Starbucks and it asks you, hey, give me your email address and you can have free Wi-Fi access. But instead of, and it is a legit Wi-Fi access point and you'll be able to use the internet, but instead of just loading that into a marketing list for whatever development company owns the mall or whatever retailer it is, they're gonna harvest that username and password pair and then try that against maybe 100,000 websites on a big list later on. It's gross, it's mean, it's bad guy stuff. It absolutely happens. A virtual private network encrypts what you are transmitting, and it provides a real layer of security against any unwanted third-party rando observation. That's basically it. VPNs are super easy to use. They're not very expensive. Some of the more popular ones include things like Proton VPN, Express VPN, Nord, N-O-R-D VPN. It doesn't really matter necessarily what service you use so long as it is reputable. A lot of times it's only a couple of bucks a month and you can get multiple devices where you can install it, and then whenever you're connected to a Wi-Fi network that you don't absolutely know and trust 100%, you click a button essentially, and then you're connected through a virtual private network, and then everything you're doing is hidden from anyone else that might want to see it. That's it. It's not terribly complicated, and it is absolutely worth doing. Now, in a pinch, if you are in a place where the internet isn't very good, or you're using your VPN and it seems to be like slowing you down and it's interfering with your ability to do work, or if you don't have a VPN installed or you've just decided not to get one, which you should do, that's why we're having this conversation, but if you haven't done it yet, you can use the mobile hotspot on your phone and use your cellular data to access the internet for whatever device that you're using. So you can access the internet on your laptop through your cell phone. That at least creates a closed loop, and you're the only people that are going to be engaged in that. Just make sure if you are using your mobile hotspot on your mobile device, in whatever flavor that might come in, that you are password protecting access to that and not making it super obvious. So give it a new name, give it a password inside of your phone's settings, and then you can use that instead of a VPN if you have to.